The living room is immersed in an almost tangible silence, dense as velvet. The only source of light is an old floor lamp that casts a circle of honey-colored light onto the faded Persian rug. At the epicenter of this glow, Gabriel and his 8-year-old son Lucas are on the floor, hunched over a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. It is Van Gogh's The Starry Night, a chaos of blues, yellows, and spirals, a challenge that would drive most people mad. For Lucas, it is a symphony. He does not look at the image on the box. His thin, pale fingers hover over the scattered pieces, moving with a certainty that transcends logic. He groups them not by shape, but by nuances of color that Gabriel can barely distinguish. A slight hum escapes his lips, a low, constant sound, the soundtrack of his concentration. Gabriel watches him, his heart torn between wonder and a loneliness that eats away at him. Suddenly, his cell phone, resting next to his leg, vibrates against the wooden floor. The sound is a violent intrusion into that sanctuary of silence. Gabriel feels a tightness in his chest, a knot of guilt. The screen lights up with a notification from a dating app, the smiling face of a woman named Helena. He slides his thumb across the screen, the cold blue glow contrasting with the warm light of the lamp. His thumb hesitates over the message button. He looks at Lucas, who is now rocking gently back and forth, lost in Van Gogh's turbulent sky. And the weight of his lie, of his secret plan, crushes him like the force of 1,000 atmospheres. Hours later, the house is in absolute silence. Lucas sleeps, wrapped in his planet print blanket, a gift from his mother. Gabriel is in the kitchen, the refrigerator door open, not because he is hungry, but because the dim light inside prevents him from staying in total darkness. He stares at an old photo held in place by a magnet, him and Sophia, his late wife, smiling on a beach years before Lucas was born. It is to her that he speaks, in a silent outburst that tears his soul apart. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, my love." The voice echoes in his mind, tired and fragile. "I swore I would protect him, that I would never let the world hurt him. But maybe I'm the one hurting him the most." The memory that poisons him resurfaces, vivid and cruel. The memory of Vanessa. She appeared a year after Sophia's death, like a breath of life in a lung that had forgotten how to breathe. She was vibrant, full of plans. Gabriel, hungry for normality, dove in headfirst. He introduced her to Lucas as a friend. Lucas in her presence was quiet, withdrawn. Gabriel used his rehearsed excuses. He's very shy. He takes a while to warm up. After 6 months, feeling the relationship getting serious, he decided to tell her the truth. He chose a cafe, a neutral place. The smell of coffee and croissants filled the air. The words came out stumbling, him explaining the diagnosis, the beauty of Lucas's mind, the unique way he saw the world. Vanessa listened, her smile slowly freezing into a mask of politeness. "Gabriel," she began, and the tone was already a sentence. "I really admire you, I do. But I need to be brutally honest. I want a life, a real life. With last-minute trips, with noisy dinners with friends, with a partner who can be my partner in everything. What you're describing isn't a life, it's constant management. It's a burden." The word burden hit him like a punch. He tried to argue, to talk about love, about adaptation. She interrupted him. "Let's be realistic. No woman would willingly choose this. You have a good heart, but you're stuck. I don't want to be stuck with you." The drive home that day was a blur. He remembers parking the car in front of the house and sitting there for almost an hour, unable to get out. Her words spinning around in his head. Burden. Stuck. No woman would choose this. That night, as he put Lucas to bed, he looked at his son's serene face and felt a protective rage, burning away his pain. There, in that moment of despair, the plan was born. The lie. He would build a fortress around Lucas, and the gate would only be open to someone who was already in love with what was inside, without knowing the name of the fortress. It was a war strategy, born from the broken heart of a lonely soldier. The period that followed Gabriel's decision was a dark procession of encounters that seemed scripted by the devil himself to test his resolve. Each woman was a new nail in the coffin of his hope, and a new brick in the wall of his lie. He vividly remembers a Sunday brunch date with Isabel, the digital influencer. The place was trendy, noisy, with electronic music pulsing softly, and the sound of conversations and cutlery echoing off the concrete walls. A sensory hell for Lucas. Gabriel had prepared him for days, but the boy was visibly overwhelmed, slumped in his chair, staring at the wood pattern on the table. Isabel arrived late, talking loudly on her cell phone. "Yes, honey, the engagement was everything." She sat down, blew a kiss in Gabriel's direction, and turned to Lucas. "Hey, handsome, what's with the serious face? Smile for the photo." Before Gabriel could intervene, she already had her cell phone in position. Lucas turned his face away. "Oh, you're so shy. No problem, we'll just take a candid shot," she said, taking several photos of the table, the food, and a quick one that caught Gabriel with a forced smile and Lucas's neck. Throughout the brunch, she didn't ask a single genuine question about the boy. She talked about her partnerships, about a gift she loved, about the drama of another influencer. When Lucas dropped a fork, the metallic sound made him jump. Isabel rolled her eyes slightly and commented to Gabriel in a whisper that wasn't low enough. "He's a little clumsy, isn't he? Maybe some etiquette lessons would help with his coordination." Gabriel felt his blood boil. He paid the bill, made up an excuse about an appointment, and practically dragged them out of there. In the car, while Lucas finally relaxed in the silence, Gabriel deleted Isabel's contact with cold fury. Every encounter was a variation on the same theme: the complete inability to see the child behind the symptoms, the woman who thought he needed more discipline, the one who suggested essential oils to calm his anxiety, the one who asked if he understood what people were saying. They were all judges, amateur diagnosticians, offering easy solutions to a complexity they didn't bother to observe. Each, "it didn't work," was further proof for Gabriel. The world wasn't ready for his son. The label autistic was an invitation to prejudice. Therefore, the label had to go. Only the boy would remain, waiting for someone with eyes to see. And then, like a statistical anomaly, Helena appeared. Her profile was unassuming. A single photo, where she wasn't smiling at the camera, but looking intently at a small object in her hands. The description was simply, "Watch Restorer. I appreciate things that last." Gabriel felt a twinge of curiosity. The first meetings were in quiet places, he suggested. A bookstore, a botanical garden on a weekday. Helena was an extraordinary listener. She didn't fill the silence with banalities. She asked pointed, profound questions. When he mentioned Lucas, the lie came out with the ease of practice. He's an amazing kid, but very much in his own world. He loses track of time with his puzzles. He's shy with strangers. Helena just watched him, her gray eyes seeming to register every micro-expression. "Concentration is a gift," she said simply. "Most people don't know how to concentrate on anything anymore." The day she came to their house for the first time was one of the most stressful days of Gabriel's life. He spent the entire morning in a feverish state of anxiety, tidying up the house and instructing Lucas. "Son, when Helena arrives, can you please try to say hi?" "That's all." Lucas just nodded, without taking his eyes off his new project, organizing all his books by color, creating a rainbow on the bookshelf. Helena arrived on time, bringing not flowers or wine, but a small velvet toolbox. When she entered, Lucas was on the floor, completely absorbed. He didn't look up. "Lucas, this is Helena," Gabriel said, his voice louder than he intended. He was about to launch into his standard excuse. "He didn't hear you. Sometimes he zones out," when Helena gestured for him to stop. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Let him finish what he's doing." She walked across the room, not as a visitor, but as an observer. Her eyes didn't rest on the mess of books, but on the chromatic order Lucas had created. "Wow," she said softly to herself. "That's beautiful." Then she sat down in an armchair, opened her toolbox, and began working on the parts of an old clock, creating her own bubble of concentration. The conflict within Gabriel was a civil war. Every minute he spent living his lie was a betrayal of the woman who seemed to intuitively understand his son. Suddenly, without warning, Lucas began stacking his wooden blocks, building a tower that grew taller and taller. Gabriel knew that when the tower fell, the noise could set him off. He braced himself for the impact. The tower fell. Lucas cringed and let out a high-pitched moan. Gabriel's heart raced, but Helena calmly took a small brass bell from her box and rang it softly. The sound was pure, crystalline. It cut through the tension. Lucas stopped moaning and looked in the direction of the sound. Curious, Gabriel looked from one to the other, a prisoner of his own charade, witnessing a connection he was actively sabotaging with his silence. The real turning point, the moment when Gabriel's universe cracked and reconfigured itself, happened on a rainy autumn afternoon. The sky outside was gray, and the constant sound of rain against the windows created an intimate and melancholic atmosphere. Helena had become a regular presence, and that day she had brought a complex project, a large pendulum clock whose gears were scattered on a protective cloth on the dining room table. Lucas, meanwhile, was on the rug, struggling with the last pieces of the sky and the starry night. There were dozens of pieces of almost identical blue, and he was visibly frustrated. He tried to force one piece into the wrong place, then another. A low moan began to vibrate in his chest. He waved his EUA, hands in the air, a gesture of impending overload. Gabriel from the sofa felt the familiar panic rising in his throat. He knew the signs, first the frustration, then the sound, then the swaying of the body, and then the total crisis, where the world became too much and Lucas needed to shut down completely. He prepared to get up, to intervene, to execute the calming procedure he had developed over the years. But Helena, at the table, sensed the change in the atmosphere. She stopped polishing. A piece. Her movements ceased. She didn't look directly at Lucas so as not to increase the pressure. Instead, she did something extraordinary. She picked up the largest and heaviest brass gear, a cogwheel the size of her palm. She held it up to the dim light in the room, admiring its shine for a moment. Then, with a deliberate, smooth movement, she tilted it over the edge of the table and let it fall to the wooden floor. It wasn't a loud fall. The piece was heavy enough not to clink, but to roll with a low, resonant, continuous sound. Whirr. The golden gear rolled across the floor, spinning on its own axis, and came to rest a few inches from where Lucas was sitting. Lucas's moaning ceased. The rocking stopped. His eyes, previously fixed on the impossibility of the puzzle, were now locked on the metallic, perfectly symmetrical object. He reached out hesitantly and touched the cold edge of the gear with his fingertip. Then, with both hands, he picked it up. He turned it over, feeling its weight, tracing its precise teeth with his thumb. The storm in his mind had passed, diverted by a sound, a shape, simple physics. Gabriel watched, paralyzed. An epiphany struck him with the force of lightning. He had spent years trying to translate the world to Lucas, and Lucas to the world. He used words, excuses, explanations. Helena used none of that. She used Lucas's own language, the language of patterns, sounds, systems, physics. She didn't try to calm him down. She gave him a new focus, a system more interesting than his own frustration. At that moment, Gabriel didn't see Helena passing a test. He saw his test, his wall, his lie, reduced to dust. They were useless. Worse than that, they were an insult to the emotional intelligence of the woman in front of him, and to the beauty of his son's mind. True love didn't need his lame translations. True love spoke the original language. The confession that night was the most terrifying and liberating surrender of Gabriel's life. He waited for Lucas to fall asleep and found Helena in the living room reading by the light of the lamp. He turned off the TV, a gesture that made her look up from her book. "Helena, I need to tell you something, and it's the hardest thing I've ever had to say." His voice was a whisper, trembling and heavy with shame. He started from the beginning. He spoke of Sophia, of her death, of the promise. He spoke of Vanessa, repeating her words, burden, trapped, as if they were poison in his mouth. And then he confessed his plan, his deliberate lie, the invisible test he had subjected her to. Finally, he uttered the word he had kept locked away. "Lucas isn't just shy, Helena. He's autistic." As he said it, he felt a mixture of panic and relief. He lowered his eyes, unable to face her reaction, expecting disappointment, anger at his manipulation. The silence that followed was the longest of his life. Then he felt her hand on his. It was warm and firm. "Gabriel, look at me." He raised his eyes. Hers contained neither anger nor pity. There was an understanding sadness, but above all, an unshakable calm. "I know," she said softly. "What?" he stammered. "I don't know the name, the label, but I see the boy. I see how he lines things up to make sense of the world. I see that certain sounds hurt him and others calm him. I see that he doesn't like to be touched by surprise. I see that he communicates, but not always with words. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't shyness. She squeezed his hand. I don't feel deceived, Gabriel. I feel sad that you carried this fear alone for so long, for believing you had to do it. The absolution was so complete that it took his breath away. That was the biggest victory. The others, the small ones, came cascading down in the days that followed. The victory of the next day, when Helena arrived, Gabriel said, Lucas is having a difficult day. He's a little overwhelmed sensorially. Using the right words, the truth was liberating. The victory of Helena bringing a book about clock mechanisms for Lucas, and the two of them spending an hour sitting side by side, turning the pages in silence, Lucas pointing to the gears he recognized. The victory of Lucas initiating interaction for the first time. He took Helena's hand and guided her to the window to show her how the afternoon light created a rainbow through the crystal of the clock pendulum. It was an invitation to his world, an invitation that Gabriel's lie would never have allowed. A few weeks later, Gabriel found himself alone in Helena's workshop. It was a fascinating place, a sanctuary where time stood still. Hundreds of clocks, in various states of repair, filled the shelves. The air smelled of oil and old wood. Helena had invited him to see her space, and now he was there, waiting for her to finish a phone call. He stopped in front of a workbench where the innards of a table clock were exposed. Tiny springs, gears of various sizes, screws that looked like dust. To a layman, it was a chaos of useless parts. But he knew that for Helena, each piece had a function, a place, a purpose. And if a single piece was out of place, the whole thing wouldn't work. It was then that he understood himself. He looked at his son and saw a complex mechanism that the world did not understand. Afraid that the world would break him, he decided to hide the gears, presenting only the polished, silent outer case. He was trying to sell an empty shell, afraid that no one would want the trouble of understanding the mechanism. Helena, with her watchmaker's soul, didn't care about the box. She fell in love with the ticking she heard from afar. She saw the beauty in the gears. He remembered his desperate search for a normal life. How foolish he had been. He was chasing an advertising photo, a margarine commercial. Normal life didn't exist. What existed was life, his life, and it was made up of quiet mornings, the sound of puzzle pieces, the smell of clock oil on the hands of the woman he loved, and the pure joy of watching his son discover a new pattern in the light. He realized that protecting Lucas didn't mean hiding him. It meant finding the right people to share his complexity with. People who, like Helena, didn't see broken pieces but a unique and fascinating mechanism waiting to be understood. True normality, he concluded, was not the absence of challenges. It was the presence of love, right in the middle of them. The scene is now radically different 6 months later. It's Lucas's 9th birthday. In the past, Gabriel would have avoided any kind of celebration, afraid of overwhelming him. Today, the living room is softly decorated. There are only 4 guests: Gabriel, Helena, and a couple of her friends, a librarian and his wife, a potter, people of a calm and observant nature. There is no loud music, just the sound of quiet conversation. The cake, made by Helena, is shaped like the Orion constellation. Lucas is sitting on the floor, showing the librarian his favorite book about deep space. He isn't talking much, but he points to the pictures, and the man responds with gentle questions that don't require long answers. That nebula is incredible, Lucas. The colors are fantastic. Helena is sitting near them, not as a supervisor, but as part of that calm ecosystem, working on a small embroidery. Gabriel watches her, talking to the potter about clay. He's not tense. He's not monitoring. He's present. He's relaxed. At one point, Lucas gets up, walks over to Gabriel, and pulls on his shirt sleeve. "Dad, more cake," he says, the 2 words clear and direct. Gabriel smiles, a genuine smile that reaches his eyes. "Sure, champ." Helena winks at him from across the room. It's a universe of communication in that simple gesture. They are a team. The house is no longer a fortress against the world, but a safe harbor from which they can sail. They know that storms will still come, that the world outside hasn't magically changed, but the fundamental difference is that their boat no longer has a lone captain. There are 3 of them, each with their own role, sailing together. Hope is no longer a vague desire for an easier future. It is the solid and present certainty that no matter what happens, they have each other. They have their own time zone, their own rhythm, their own star map. And that is more than normal. It is extraordinary. The ultimate proof of love is not finding someone perfect. It's finding someone who has the courage to be present in your imperfection. If you've ever felt like Gabriel, afraid to show all your pieces, or if you aspire to love like Helena, with a soul that sees beyond labels, then this community is your place. Leave an I see you in the comments to honor all the silent stories that deserve to be seen. Sign up for more healing stories and share this video. You never know who needs a sign to believe in true love again.